Good afternoon, art students. This is Mr. Verzat. Today we're going to look a little bit deeper into perspective, and we're going to examine how to draw rounded forms and also how to connect rounded corners in perspective. The reason why we're going into this is because anytime you draw something in perspective that's on that z-axis that recedes off into the distance, it is distorted and compressed. So if you have a circular manhole cover that's sitting on the street and you're looking down that street, it's on the z-axis and therefore needs to be compressed and distorted. We call that foreshortening. Foreshortening means anytime in a 3D world you want to make something look as if it's receding, it needs to be distorted somehow. With squares and blocks and cubes, that's easy. All you need to do is connect the corners to the vanishing point. But with rounded forms, not so much. There's an infinite number of little tiny angles and corners inside of a circle. And in order to distort that, you need a scaffolding technique to do that. Now, what's a scaffolding technique? Well, a scaffolding technique is basically this, right here in the middle. It's basically a pre-drawing technique that's meant to go away. It's a guideline to help you draw a circle. So let's take a look at it and see what we've got here. What we have is a receding plane, or in other words, a square or rectangle that's on the z-axis receding off into the distance. We've got an X, and then a plus, and then a circle, oval thingamajig in the middle. Well, this is your model for how to compress and distort a circle. So let's get a little bit more detailed here. Drawing rounded forms in perspective, such as, say, for example, a manhole cover, the roof of a barn, a tire, a pop can in three-dimensional space, it needs a scaffolding technique. It's very difficult to eyeball it accurately. So let's take a look. If you're going to do an oval, naturally you'll need a rectangle for it. Circles, you just need a square. So here's the step-by-step technique. We're going to go through this really quick. It's written down, and then I'm going to show you actually visually. I'm going to create an example here for you. So what you do, first of all, it doesn't matter what form of perspective it is. It could be 1 point, 2 point, 3 point. This technique carries over to all of them. So what you do is you make, if it's going to be a circle receding, you create a plane on the z-axis, a square, and then what you do is you draw an X right in the middle of it. Now the purpose of that is to find the center. And the best way to find the center of a square is to connect the corners inside of it. All right? Next, what you do, once you have that center point, you do a straight up and down line from there, and then you connect the middle point directly to the vanishing point, and that creates this little left to right line here. Now, the reason why we're doing this and not just sticking with the X is because we're going to draw a circle, and we need as much visual help as we can to show us where the circle goes. We're essentially making spokes on like a bike wheel, for example. And so the more lines you have connecting from the middle, the more help you're going to have in drawing your circle. All right? So after you've gotten all those lines done, you then just simply use them to guide you. So for example, wherever the lines intersect, we've got our north and our south line and our east and our west line here, that'll be where the circle touches directly on the scaffold. These areas in here, this is basically a guide point to help us know where on the slanted line the circle intersects. So we know that we need, if we didn't have a circle here yet and we just had a block, our square with our X and our plus, we would know that we would need to connect this area to this area to make the circle. And so we would do that. And we would see where it intersected on this slanted line and use that to guide us when we draw on this slanted line over here. Now notice how this corner here, where the circle intersects, is way shorter than this corner where the circle intersects. That's because it's foreshortened, or in other words, it's distorted to look as if it's in perspective. So just be mindful of that as you work. One thing you can do is take a dinner plate and tilt it a little bit just to study how circles change, how they morph when they're forced into a receding plane. Okay? So let's look at some examples over here. We're also going to talk about how to connect rounded edges to a vanishing point. We've done pointy cubes. Rounded edges, truth be told, are no different. First, let's look and see how this scaffolding technique can be used artistically. If you're going to make, say, the roof of a barn, for example, same exact concept. The only difference is if you're going to make that curved roof of the barn, you might want to have it raised up a little bit in order to make some room down here for more stuff, or you can just make the rectangle the side of your barn. It's entirely up to you. But you can look here and see how it applies. That curve for the roof of the barn lines up to the vanishing points. You would do the same thing for a manhole cover. So let's take a look at how you connect a round edge. Well, rule of thumb is, and this is kind of like a barn-shaped letter A looking form, rule of thumb is that to connect a round edge to your vanishing point, you pretend that the corner that would normally be on a cube is just the highest and most furthest out part of your rounded curve. So that means the very top of this form, the most roundmost portion that's the furthest out, connects directly to your vanishing point. Let's zoom in here a little bit. So, how do you find that rounded curve? Well, what I like to do is I take my ruler and I would line my ruler first of all up on my vanishing point and then place my ruler right up against this curve, and I would pull my ruler out, and right when that curve starts to, pull away from the ruler and we start to see the white of the paper, then we know, uh-oh, we've gone too far. Basically, just line your ruler up to where it just touches the outside edge, and that's how you know where you connect your line to. So, as far as the back portion of this form right here, how do you know how to make this line? Well, this plane is in one-point perspective. It's coming straight at us. It's going up and down, and it's on the left and right. It's on the y and the x-axis. It's in our face. It's not receding. So we know that this curve that goes along the outside right of the form is going to be exactly the same on the back. We just close it off the same way we do a cube. The only difference is since this back portion is further away from us, it needs to be smaller. So it's going to be the same angle, same shape, it's just going to be smaller, and it's going to conform to our lines that have receded off into the vanishing point. Use these lines here as a helper tool to help you get all your forms within each other, lined up. So let's take a look at some non-examples. Here's a common mistake with beginners. The rounded top of this barn is not in perspective. Basically, it's just a circle that could have been drawn with a compass, and it's been chopped off on the bottom to make it look as if it's part of the roof. This is a common mistake or shortcut that beginning artists use. Make sure you use the scaffolding technique. Yes, it does take work, but yes, it also is good craftsmanship, and your forms align, and it makes to fulfill the portion of the assignment. Study angles of circles as they're receding to understand what parts of the circle curve and what don't. Shortcuts will always hurt your work. I do not recommend you ever do this. So just follow the rules, use the technique, and you won't have to encounter this. Also, let's take a look at some mistakes when connecting corners. This is a very exaggerated example, but a common mistake is students just kind of line their corners up wherever they want them to. In our class, we're going to be working on making our name in 3D, and not just using boring block letters. We're going to use letters that have curves in them. You're going to make your own font and really cool sign of your name, and it's going to have curves in it. And it's important to know how to connect those lines to make a 3D side to a curved form. And once again, all you do is you line up your vanishing point with your ruler to the outmost part of the sphere, and you go right to the point where the ruler almost isn't touching the sphere anymore, and that's how you know where the outmost part of your sphere is. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to build a couple of examples, show you how to make this, and that will be that. So here we go. We've got our paper here, and we've got a horizon line with a vanishing point, and I put the vanishing point way over here. It's going to be in one-point perspective. So how do we do this? Well, I'm going to basically, I want to have a receding plane. So I create a square going off in the distance, just like that. Just like any other method, I just started with this closest line here, and I connected the tops and the bottoms to the vanishing point and then closed it off. Alright? Next step, we need to make an X right in the middle, and that's to find the middle of the square. Bam! Just like that. Zoom in a little bit. There we go. And then our next step, we need to make a straight up and down line from the middle point of that X. Next step after that, take the middle point of your X and line it up to your vanishing point to create another receding line. Just like so. So you got this bike spoke kind of a pattern going on here. Alright, and then the next step after that is just draw the sphere, or draw your circle. I'll just let you know, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. You might have to draw your circle 2 times, 3 times. You might have to erase and go over it again and again and again. Maybe you might need to do it a couple of times. You might get it only once. Who knows? It takes practice. It's one of those tools that takes practice. So that is basically that. Now let's take a look at another example of how to create 3-dimensional rounded forms with your corner. So I need my vanishing point here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically make a circle and then make a pop can that's 3D. Now this is going to be different than that scaffolding technique because we're not going to have a receding circle plane. This is just about how to connect your corners once again. You start with a sphere, line your ruler up and connect it to the edge just like before, and then close it off. This would be a cylinder or a pop can floating in space. And once again, since this plane here, the circle, is right in our face, when we go to close it off, it's going to be the same line, only smaller because it's further away. So, if there's any part of this assignment that was confusing, I know these kind of things you need to hear them more than once, feel free to rewind the video. Watch it more than once. Have that Frayer model that I hand out to you, which is exactly the same thing that we're using in the video, have that out so that you can study as well. So again, in class, if you have any questions, we will go over this, and I look forward to seeing you. Have a great day.